I say this to young bartenders all the time. Listen, you're in this business because you like to make people happy. And if you haven't realized that, you either need to open your eyes to that, or you need to go do something else.
Thank you for listening to Serves You Right. My name is Andrew, and today we're speaking to someone pretty awesome. Bobby Gleason, aka Bobby G, as he's known in the restaurant and bar world. Now, I kind of struggled here, because Bobby G has such a long list of accolades, I didn't even know what to include. The fact that he is the former Master Mixologist for Beam Suntory, maybe the Guinness World Record for most drinks made in an hour, and the list goes on and on. I thought that it would be better to focus on the fact that even with all that he's done, even with all he does, the fact that he runs Mixology Made Easy, all of his consulting, all of his work, even today, the thing we talked most about was service, taking care of guests, seeing people, modeling your behavior after the best, and making sure that you're always keeping the guest first and foremost in your mind. Bobby G's awesome, and I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed recording it. Thank you all for listening, and let's rock and roll. It's been, probably 10 years, if I'm going to guess. Something like that, because I saw you at one of the New Mexico Cocktail and Cultures, one of the original ones.
Yeah.
Way back. I did want to start off, kind of a funny thing. Have you ever Googled yourself?
It's kind of, sort of, kind of wanted to
yeah, just to see what's out there.
I was looking for some pictures to see what pictures were out there, and I found some of the really cool ones that I had forgotten about.
I was doing a little last minute research because I have a general, familiarity with your story, and I just typed in Bobby Gleason just to see what pop up, and it just, first thing, Robert Gleason, serial killer.
Oh, yeah.
I do not think that I have the right guy here.
Yeah.
So I started adding on different words like mixologist just to sort through some of that.
Also my street cred.
We definitely are going to respect your time today. Bobby, how did you get into the world of bartending? Can you tell me the story, kind of your beginning?
Yeah, I started I was working as a valet in some clubs, and I did a little gig in Wisconsin. Really, I did no bartending per se. I did help make drinks that were, we did batch drinks even back then. This was 1979, 1980, did batch drinks, and they were really bad, really bad.
Jungle juice.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah, I tell the story and how, it was made in what was essentially they bought a new trash can, a new container. It was like a big bucket, really. And a powdered mix, some water, cheapest booze you could ever imagine, and stirred with a broken table leg. Mm-hmm. That was the only thing that was big enough to get to the bottom.
Yeah.
That was some bad. Then
someone from my college, actually, probably, but yeah.
Yeah, I moved to South Florida and got in the nightclub industry there, running valet. And I went from a little town called Pompano, and we were working at a nightclub called La Volcanique, which was actually one of the largest clubs in the country at the time. And my manager, Bobby Albino, he had gone to New York and worked in New York City, worked a big club in New York City, came back, and then was hired by the folks that owned Shooters on the Water in Fort Lauderdale, that iconic place in Fort Lauderdale. And they were expanding up to Boynton Beach and had a club that was the Shooters on the Water, which was on the lower level, and then the upper level was called Upper Decks. It was a round building, sat right on the Intercoastal, and Bobby wanted me to go with him, and I said, yeah, I'm ready to go. And he goes, well, you can't take the valet that's already spoken for. And I said, well, what do you want me to do? And he goes, I've always wanted to get you inside, so you're going to start as a barback. And I said, a couple of things happened that weekend. I saw him on a Sunday night, and I said, I'm in. And he goes, great, you're in. Started as a barback, and I always tell the story and how I'd be sitting there in the old 3-position sink washing glasses all night. End of the night, my back was sore, but I would look down the bar, and I'd see that bartender sitting there with a beautiful woman waiting for him and a bucket full of cash. And I said, that's got to be the job for me. That's what I want to do. Yeah. And I was fortunate. I had a couple of guys, Dave B. and Billy Christos, and they gave me a bottle, a pour spout, and a tin, and a jigger, and said, go home and learn how to pour. And so at this time, you learned how to free pour. I learned to free pour before I learned to properly use a jigger. Now, I mean, how to use jigger. But I learned, and then right in the middle of the night, he goes, pour test. I said, okay. So I poured everything out, and he goes, all right, now pour it with your left hand. I go, wait, you didn't tell me to pour with my left hand. He goes, so you got two hands, don't you, dumbass? And I'm like, yeah, fair point, so I had to learn how to pour accurately, free pour, before I was allowed to pour on the service end, and then I built that up, and I'm very proud to say that I have taken home many buckets of cash, but I still sit here before you as a single man, so we see how well that worked out for me.
Well, you got 50%. No, that's more than some people get. Yeah. Before we move on, you said that just as a throwaway. I just want to see. You said some things happened. What happened with the valet, or is it not worth going into? I'm like, was there a snowstorm? This is Florida. It can't be that bad, right?
I was in Florida. There's a lot of strange things that happen in Florida.
Crocodile attack, or
yeah, I was often told even though I don't work for Beam Suntory before, they're ingrained in my mind after so many years. My legal department said you better not tell that story anymore. So
sure, fair enough.
We can talk about it off camera.
Okay, yeah. After this, I do want to know. I will say that I've worked only in a couple places with valet, but those guys work hard.
Yeah,
they make barbacks look like the lazy people in the service industry. Barbacks work hard too.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So.
Well, part of another thing why I moved to Florida was to play baseball, and so that kept me in good shape. I mean, I went through shin splints and all that, running on concrete and asphalt, and it wasn't, like you look at valets today, and I don't see any of them running. I look at them and I go, boy, man, our guys would run circles around you.
Yeah.
And we ran a long ways, and we worked really hard the whole night, rain or shine, and it rained a lot in South Florida.
Yeah.
And, but it was good. But on the bar backing issue, I truly believe that it is the best way to start in the bar industry. If you want to be a bartender, being a barback is the place to start.
It is. Familiarity that develops when you're a barback with a really good bartender. There's a level of growth and learning that can happen that you can't replicate on your own at home. You need that other person. I probably could have studied 1,000 books, and I think I learned more in the few shifts that I worked with Todd Walker than any other way, because I was just watching it done, and okay, that's how he pours it. Okay, got it, and I'm just cleaning glasses the whole time, just making sure it's good. Yeah.
The one thing that I do some events here in Las Vegas for a little restaurant that I'm working with. We do a charity event for a big church, and there's 2,000 people that come into this thing, and it's a lot of work and thrown at you very hard. And so while I'd be there for 6-8 hours setting up, the last 2 hours, the extra help would come in. So, okay, these guys are working with you. What do you want them to do? And I had two guys, and I looked at them. I go, okay, which one of you have poured drinks before? And they both got kind of blank looks on their face. And he goes, well, I kind of pour once in a while. I said, all right, you're going to be the other bartender. He goes, wait, I don't know. I said, we're making one drink. I'm going to teach you how to make one drink, and that's all you have to do. And so the other kid was really anxious, and he goes, so what's my role? I said, your role as a barback is to anticipate what we as a bartender need. So if you're seeing our glasses get low, you make sure that we have more glasses there. If you see us always reaching for ice and we have to take an extra step over, make it so we don't have to take that step. And when you see a bartender pouring a bottle and it's getting low, have one ready. And that anticipation, is key to a really good barback. So, a good barback will make sure that a bartender never has to stop his flow in anything that he does.
That's what, I don't know. You probably met him at New Mexico Cocktails and Culture, Chris Milligan. He said when he noticed that, he would kind of turn to the left, or he'd be talking to a guest about a bottle that was maybe not on the rail, but the back bar, and he'd start going to get it, and I'd be there with it in hand, and he was like, oh, okay, I don't even have to move. That's when he's like, all right, Andrew can probably start becoming a bartender now.
Yeah.
But yeah, this isn't the barback hour. Sure. You started bartending. Was there any indication that you were going to be world-class mixologist from the beginning? How did that beginning go?
Well, I was fortunate that when I first started pouring, I was working in the service end. And at that time, we had what was known as a pass-through well. So there was one giant ice bin that went from one side of the bar to the other. And the cocktail servers would ice all their own glasses and put all their glasses up in an order and then call out their drink pour, their order. They would have to make the drinks, but I would have to pour the liquor. That was my only role, was pour the liquor and then, of course, bring it all up, They would be adding the mixers and stuff. And back then, cocktails were not very complicated, per se. It still started to get, and this is when I noticed, when I did finally get my first bar shift, people would come in and they'd ask for a zombie. I said, okay. I'd run down and I asked the bartender, hey, what's a zombie? He goes, put some pineapple juice, put some rum, make it red, send it out. Okay. So I went and did that, and then a little while later, someone would come up and say, hey, what's a scorpion? Can I get a scorpion? So I run down and hey, what's a scorpion? Put some rum in it, put some juice in it, make it red, send it out. I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's got to be more to this. And that's when I first started looking up recipes and then starting to read these things and going, wow. And then I cannot, for the life of me, remember what book it was, but I remember reading about one of these drinks and they had a history of it. And I go, this is cool. I want to learn more. And I started to learn more and more, And I would always say, what I found in the nightclub, I was working nightclub industry, so in the nightclub industry, the way to make money is to get women at your bar. Because if women would sit at the bar, men would follow, and then the money would flow and the drink
bar's full. Yeah.
And I knew that this face wasn't going to attract any women to my bar. So the only way I could get them there is make sure that they felt safe and had a good drink. And I remember we always had these ladies' nights where ladies would get free drinks, for the first hour or two. And I would work as hard as I could to get them drinks, and they would always reply to the manager, this guy's great. Because the other bartenders were like, I'm not wasting my time.
Free drinks, yeah.
Money. They were in it for the tips. I was in it for the service. And I think that is one of the biggest lessons I could give anybody getting into this industry. And I had this question the other day when I was doing another event and I was giving these kids to work with me and they go, oh, Master Mixologist, so do you teach people how to make tips? And I said, no, we don't do that. I said, if you are in this industry because you want to make tips, you're in the wrong industry. We're in this industry because we like to make people happy. And by making people happy, those tips will come. By providing the service and providing the hospitality, you will earn your tips. But if you're in it, and unfortunately, today, especially in places like Las Vegas, which gets a bad name for it, these bartenders, they expect you to tip them before you even serve them. And the tip should be earned. It shouldn't be automatic. The auto-grat is ruining our industry, I think.
No, there's also that element of it's a lack of welcoming people that I see in some bars too. Like you can hide behind the mixology. You can hide behind the menu, and you can hide behind. I think Tony Abou-Ganim has a story about how before he wrote his book about vodka, he went into a joint and he asked for what vodkas were present because he didn't see them on the back bar. And the guy was like, well, we got 4 and they're down here. And in my opinion, that's 4 too many. And Tony's like, I'm going to pay the check and leave then, what's the point there? And
what's hilarious about that is we did vodka class yesterday and Tony told that same story yesterday.
Oh, really? Yeah. I mean, it's a point that, a lot of people they'll hold their nose up at it. I'm more like, after me and you met, I went more into the Somm route and went deeper into wine. And you see the same thing in wine too, where there's a split between kind of the old school, the snobby Somm who's like, I know what's good. Oh, you're drinking sweet. Forget about you. And one of the good things that I see a lot of, and I'm sure there's this in the bar world too, but a lot of the younger Somms coming online are a lot more welcoming, opening, and hospitable. And it's like, we don't care what wine you're drinking, if it's a sweet Moscato, or maybe it's not that most expensive cab, but you're doing that funky Pinot Noir. We're more excited that you're drinking wine. It's a much more inclusive thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. The hospitality is making that big comeback, in the industry. For the longest time, they say, the 80s and the 90s, the drinks were terrible. They were different. They weren't what we're drinking today, Late 90s really started to spur a change in the industry, and I think what we did at Bellagio had a lot to do with that. And then in the 2000s, when the classic cocktails came back, and then all of a sudden you see, bartenders with big waxy mustaches and vests that were way too tight, and, and they just got too pretentious. Then it was all of a sudden, it was all about them. It's all about me. You come see me. When I came up in the industry, we wanted to get a following, and that's why you made better drinks. You wanted to create drinks so people had to come back to you to get them because you were the only one that made them, because you made something unique and it was good and they liked it. You knew they liked it because they would order another one. I mean, that's always the biggest sign is, am I making something good? And as we always say, and Tony says this all the time too, you go into a bar and you ask the bartender, says, "Hey, what would you like?" "I don't know." Ooh, that sparks your interest.
Let's
as
go.
A bartender.
Yeah.
But when a guest says, "Listen, I just don't like gin," and the bartender's like, "I'm going to make you a great cocktail with gin, and you're going to like it," that's not the way to go. I mean, you were given one thing. Just don't make it with gin. And some bartenders want to force themselves on it. I mean, the key is to make people what they want. How they want it, and then, gain their confidence, and then go on to make them something unique and different and work with them and make them feel like they're a part of it.
In my mind, I was imagining someone at like a chef's counter and saying, like, "Just so you know, I'm a vegetarian," and the chef saying, like, "Just wait till you try this steak, though. Just wait." All right, I'm sorry to interrupt. We will get right back to Bobby G and Andrew, but I wanted to take a second and ask, if you could, please take a moment to like or comment on the episode. It really does help us grow, and it would mean the world to me. All right, back to Bobby G. That might be an interesting way, too, to discuss this, because I do feel like a lot of what happened in drink culture as it was coming up was applying kind of the ethos of the kitchen to drinks. Pretty, I'd say just like average American fare, and then you start seeing it evolve and we get more European influence. You see things elevate. You had, post-prohibition cocktails suffered a little, would be a light way of saying it, and then you start seeing them elevate. I am wondering if we would have seen a similar kind of strange evolution with chefs. So I'm not really explaining this well, but I'm wondering, the bar kind of strikes me as a very similar position to chefs, the closest front of house to back house, because you're actually making something. Mm-hmm. I wonder how many chefs, if they had to actually interact with the guests as they cook things, if we would see the same complaint about, like, man, some of these guys are not hospitable. So, like, I wonder if it's just kind of a weird position because it is kind of hybrid. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it very much makes sense. And a lot of times we talk about that correlation between the bar and the kitchen, and I always, not defend, but kind of define my role as a master mixologist, as a USBG certified master mixologist. The word mixologist has been around for a long time. It's not something new, but it started to come back into vernacular in the late 90s, early 2000s. And, you kind of blame New York a little bit because that's the hub where all the magazines came from. They came out of there. So all your writers were there. They didn't want to write a story about a bartender, let's write a story about a mixologist. And all of a sudden they started to get very pretentious and all of this. But if you look at the kitchen, you've got a cook, a line cook, a sous chef, a chef, and a master chef. At the end of the day, their role is to prepare food for their guests. If you look at the bar, you've got a barback, bartender, or a bartender apprentice, the bartender, then the mixologist, and the master mixologist. At the end of the day, a role is, prepare drinks for your guests. But I believe when you get to the master level, the difference between the barback and the bartender apprentice are, the barback is a guy that's stocking everything, he's the heart and soul behind the bar. Then the apprentice is the guy that's barbacking and making drinks when the bartender has to take a break. And then you have the bartender, which does everything. They've got to do, your banking and all of that. The mixologist is the guy that's starting to create menus, create new drinks, making sure that all the drinks are representative of where it is you're working. And the master level is more about teaching and inspiring, and kind of what my whole philosophy that I've had is, to educate, inspire, and entertain. And I believe that's my role. That was what I, always told my bosses that I did when I was at Beam, and I've carried that over to my philosophy at Mixology Made Easy. I want to educate, I want to inspire, and I want to do it in an entertaining way. And so, for that master chef, those guys that we see on TV, they're ultra creative, and the things that they do are pretty amazing, I mean, like you said, I watch a lot of the cooking shows, I know a lot of these chefs and stuff, and I've worked with them side by side, and most of them are really great. Some of these cooks that you see, like, for a story, I was doing some work on Crystal Cruises, and I met a guy on the way from the airport. We were being transferred from the airport, and I introduced myself to everybody, and I turned to this guy, and he had very heavy Italian accent, and I said to him, so what are you here for? He goes, I'm here to cook for the people. I go, oh, are you a guest chef? Are you? Yes, I'm speaking. I said, very cool. I said, what is your background? And he said, my family owns some restaurants in Italy. I own some restaurants here in New York. I said, oh, very cool. And I said, have you ever spoke in front of a group before? Because I've seen chefs that are amazing cooks, and you try and bring them out in front of the people, and they lock up, they freeze, they can't talk. And he says, well, I'm also the dean for the Italian cooking at the International Cooking School here in America, And I'm like, man, this guy is big time. I go, you're big time. I had a great time with him. And then still, every once in a while, I call him now. He owns a salumery. He's a very famous chef that owns a salumery. So you see these things, and sometimes you see bartenders like that as well. They're great at making cocktails, but then you ask them to speak to a crowd and they can't.
Yeah,
they lock up. And speaking to people is a key talent for a bartender.
Yeah, well,
you have to have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people.
I think, and it is kind of a different thing when you are on stage in the bar, because no one's expecting you to be super witty right there. They have cash, they're looking for drinks, but like you walk up to a stage, it's like, oh,
right, yeah.
But maybe that's just me putting my fears out on the table there.
No, I get it. Yeah. I mean, when I'm working, I always have a lot of jokes. But if someone says, "Hey, tell me a joke," you lock up.
Well, it's like telling someone, "Be natural." It's like no one who's ever heard the phrase "be natural" acts naturally for about 5 minutes, because they're like, sure. What are my hands doing? I'd want to make sure we keep going on your trajectory. Can we talk about how you got to the Bellagio and what happened there?
Oh, well, I work in nightclubs in South Florida. I met some people there whose family owned a casino here in Las Vegas, and the casino had been shut down and it's being reopened, and the family's taking back over. So that's when they went to Bobby Albino, and which is why I got my moniker Bobby G, because he was the general manager, I was his assistant.
You need a different name from the Bobby.
And so it stuck, and I'm happy because the Italians, they had nicknames for everybody. That's a pretty like low key, easy to swallow nickname. Yeah,
Bobby
right.
G. Yes, yeah.
So I came out to help them, set up the bars at the casino and run that. We ended up not getting the gaming license and built a nightclub at the same, at the time we built a nightclub. Then we ended up selling that nightclub. Towards the end of that run in that nightclub, Bobby was contacted by the people from Shooters again to come back and run this nightclub in Miami. And at that time, it was the largest nightclub on the East Coast, a place called Deco's in Miami Beach. And so Bobby said, well, I got to bring my main guy with me. Well, what does he do? He runs the bars, manages my liquor. Well, that's what we need. And so I went down and we were given the task to get the place running properly, making money, and sell it in 2 years. And we ended up selling it in 6 months. So I thought we did just a fantastic job there. I ended up selling. Then in 1989, I came back to Las Vegas and opened up the Mirage. And I went to the Mirage and they were like, we need good managers here. I go, no, I just want to bartend. Just let me get behind the bar. I want to be happy behind the bar.
You're telling my story too. Yes.
Yeah, opened the Mirage, went on to open Treasure Island, and then went on to open Bellagio, which were all under Steve Wynn. And 98 is when I met Tony, and things started changing.
Yeah. And so you were there. That was where you first started the route of representing different like liqueurs and families of liqueurs, correct?
Yeah, well, actually, what happened was Tony actually shamed me into competing.
Good. Yes.
So, Tony worked day shift, I worked swing. So for me, swing shift was 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. So I didn't get to see Tony that often. And whenever we seen him, we were always excited to see him. I was, because I really admired what he did and really got behind what he wanted to do there. And so here, Tony came behind the bar one day, and I'm like, "Hey, Tony, how you doing? Great to see you." And he goes, "Hey, how you doing? Everything." And he's like sitting there talking, and he goes, "Yeah, I noticed that you weren't in the competition today because they had a in-house cocktail competition, and Delos Benedict won that, and a great cocktail." I said, "Yeah, Tony, I'm not into that competing thing. I just want to make my guests happy." And he goes, "Well, yeah, I know. I hear all about it." I go, What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Brother, I got a stack of customer reports on you that they just love you here." He goes, "I don't know what you're doing, but this is awesome." He goes, "You make me so proud doing that." And I go, "Oh, that's really cool." And he goes, "Yeah, but I do got to say, I was disappointed that you weren't in the competition." I'm like, "Oh, build me up and knock me down. Why don't you, And I turned to him, I said, "Tony, you tell me when the next competition is, and I'm going to get in it, and I'm going to win it." He goes, "Yeah, that's what I want to hear." And a couple weeks later, he came back and he said, "Hey, we're launching this new rum called Monte Cristo. Would you like to create a cocktail for this competition?" I said, "Yeah, what are the rules?" And he told me, and so you had to do a classic frozen cocktail and then create something new. And so I did that. We went to, at the time it was called Rum Jungle at Mandalay Bay, which is no longer there, but beautiful bar. And I'm there, and the judges, they come by, they taste your cocktails, they go to the next, and they go around. And so I'm there cleaning up my station, and one of the judges comes by and says, "Hey, would you rather be known as a classic bartender or as a new wave bartender?" And I said, I like the classics, that's what I'm kind of rooted in. And he goes, "Okay." And I turned and I said to my barback, Jose, I go, "I wonder what he meant by that." And the guy turns around and he goes, "Because they can't win them both." What is he talking about? And I ended up winning.
You'd have taken both positions. Yeah.
I ended up winning and got my first big check, the big foam check. And right there on the spot, I looked at Tony and said, "Hey, Tony, can I donate this to the United States Bartenders Guild?" Because we had just started the new chapter. And he said, and Tony gets, he just loves that stuff, and I said, "I'm in, I mean, I felt personally, I'm representing Bellagio, so it's not just me. And what better way to take that money to help kick off the USBG? And then I went on and won a bunch of competitions after that. I got the bug.
Kept the string going, yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
You didn't have to donate all of them, right?
Most of them didn't have checks.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the fun part.
That came later. After I was done competing, all the big checks came out. And I was like, man.
Exactly, yeah.
But what that did was got me noticed by different brands. And so, Beam had sponsored a couple of competitions and I won. And then they brought the hierarchy of Beam came in and, sat at my bar and got to meet them and got to meet the national accounts people. And then I said, "Hey, a nightclub and bar show is going on this weekend. You guys got any tickets?" "I'm just fishing for tickets. I just want to go to the show." They go, "Oh, yeah, here, yeah. Come on us." So I went, and they had just a small little 12 by 12 box with tiny little bars. And I'm looking over. They go, "Yeah, look around, see what you like," and they're all talking. They're all trying to do business. They don't want to serve drinks. And over in the corner was a bottle of Jim Beam Black, and I hadn't had it. I said, "Hey, can I try some of this bourbon?" They go, "Yeah, sure, help yourself." And I pour it, and I'm immediately surrounded by people. And I said, and I'm looking. They go, "Yeah, go ahead, give them some. 3 hours later, I said, "Hey guys, I don't mind helping out to
my unpaid bar shift here."
But I really want to go see the show. And they said, hey, well, we thought you were having fun. I said, yeah, it kind of was. And they came back that night and said, hey, we got an event over here. Would you mind coming to bartend? Sure. And I did this and I did that. And then they asked Tony to speak at the national sales meeting in Scottsdale, Arizona. And Tony said, hey, and they said, can you bring someone with you as a guest speaker? And Tony said, hey, you want to come down and speak? I'm like, sure. I went to my friends and said, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And my friend Rob, rest his soul, he said, just talk about your passion, because that's what attracts people to you. He said, you're so passionate about what you do and making people happy, and that's all you need to talk about. And I don't know what I said, to tell you the truth. Tony started out, Tony was singing a song and doing a whole presentation. And then he says, and now I want to bring up one of our bartenders, Bobby G. And I wouldn't know what I said, to tell you the truth, but apparently what I said worked, and they asked me to do more events and more, and eventually start speaking and doing, nightclub and bar show. I started out with me and one other bartender, then it went to 4, then it went to 8, then it went to 12, and then 20 of the spokesmodels, and it was getting bigger and bigger every year. And that led to more and more speaking. And, by this time I'd left Bellagio and was working at the Rio as my first mixologist job. They asked me, what do you want your title to be? And I said, Lord Ruler of the Universe. They go, I don't know. He said,
That's not on the options here, yeah.
So I said, I want to be the beverage specialist. And I said, well, don't you want to be the master mixologist? I said, no, I'm not that yet. I said, I'm working my way towards that. And the master mixology that USBG Master Mixologist hadn't existed yet at the time, So then I was asked to go to Cincinnati for Beam. At the time, the DeKuyper plant was in Cincinnati. That's where they produced all the DeKuyper. And they asked me to come and do a presentation on how cordials worked in cocktails. And John Meisler was just absolutely thrilled because that was better than what I imagined. He goes, I have to create something. And in the meantime of him creating, I got a call from my dear friend Simon Ford. And Simon says, hey, mate, maybe an opportunity for a position in Las Vegas. Might you be interested? And I said, absolutely, Simon. What do I got to do? He says, great. As far as I'm concerned, the job is yours, but you got to go talk to Mike Olsker in California. And he was the Western Division DVP of Absolute.
Oh, yeah.
I went and I was the Absolute Ambassador of Las Vegas, which turned into Western U.S., which kind of evolved a little bit. But at the time, Absolute was still under the Beam umbrella, because Beam owned the rights to distribute Absolute, because it was owned by the Swedish government at the time. And so, little unbeknownst to me, this position was being created in the background the whole time I was working for Absolute. And I was brought into Chicago. I distinctly remember over a St. Patty's Day, because I left Las Vegas, it was 85 degrees, didn't carry a jacket, and got into Chicago and it was 40. I'm like, oh man.
Yeah, it'll do that to you.
So it was a great opportunity for me because I don't want to step sideways, I always want to step forward. But I don't want to burn any bridges. I never want to burn a bridge. So it was a great opportunity for me to step forward and still work with Absolute, still being able to bring Absolute along, but actually opening up more and getting into my heart, because, bourbon was my favorite. At Bellagio, when we did testing, Tony developed all these tests and stuff in different categories. I had the high score on the bourbon exam, which won me a trip to Kentucky in 2000. And that's where I got to meet the Beam family. And I learned how to drink bourbon from Booker No and Fred
That's
No.
Awesome.
Still have a relationship with Fred No today, and I still consider him a dear friend.
Awesome.
It was I was fortunate. I was very blessed and very fortunate.
Yeah, and that job took you, as far as I understand, all over the world, learning and teaching and showing people how to make delicious cocktails and what's part of the cocktails, everything in between.
Yeah, it sure did. I never went to I didn't go to Asia or I never went to Japan. I was kind of mad about that. The Beam, even when I was with Beam, they took all the ambassadors except for me to Japan, and I was kind of mad about that. But anyway,
still bitter.
Yeah, or Australia. I didn't get to go to Australia or in Asia, but I've been all over the world.
I still remember, and I don't know if you were part of New Mexico Cocktails and Culture in like working as with Beam Suntory or if that was on your own, but I still remember making a drink for you at Milagro, that first one we did, and your cocktail had crushed ice. And so we're back there just frantically crushing up ice for your presentation. And we were making another one of your drinks. I was trying to remember before we got on, and I just couldn't. And we had everything batched except for the base spirit. And I remember you walked in, and you looked at me and the other guy that was helping me, and you said, it's imperative that you always measure to make sure you have consistency. And then you opened up the bottle and started pouring it in. And I was just like, okay, sure. Yeah. Well, that stuck with me. Yeah.
That's 33.8 ounces right there.
Yeah. You don't have to measure if you know that.
One of the key things that I learned, especially with batching, and it was kind of forced upon me by the legal department at Beam, was, everything had to be made in parts. And because Beam would not allow me to put a recipe out in ounces because they adhered to, the government says that a proper cocktail is 1.5 ounce of 80 proof spirit. That's standard U.S. cocktail. And that goes back to all of us that have done training, that how 5 ounces of wine is the same as 12 ounces of beer, which is the same as 1.5 ounce of 80 proof spirit. You do all the math on that, it comes out to 0.60 alcohol, with all the math on it. And so, I would fight with our legal department. I said, so you're telling me that I shouldn't be selling Knob Creek? You do know that it's 100 proof, right? So you're telling me I can't serve Knob Creek in a cocktail? And they just...
Bookers.
And they were like, well, listen, just use the word parts instead of ounces. So instead of 1.5 ounces, use 1.5 parts. I'm like, oh, Jesus, I don't know if that's going to work. And, still to this day, one of the things that I teach a lot, I always go back in around 1907, there was a poem written in a New Yorker magazine on how to make a punch. And that poem went 4 of strong, 3 of weak, 2 of sour, and 1 of sweet. Trust me, for I know of what I speak. And that was how they taught people how to make a punch. So it was 4 parts strong and 3 parts weak. Well, if we look at it today as a bartender, our strong is our base spirit. And the base spirit generally is 80 proof and above. So if you have 4 parts base spirit, our weak for us is our modifier, So like say our triple sec. So if you put 3 parts triple sec in with 4 parts tequila, and then you need 2 parts sour, which is our lime juice, and then our sweetener, you're going to have a cocktail that's out of balance. So that just doesn't compute. So I tried to figure out how to teach consumers how to make drinks easy. And so I came up with my own poem that goes 2 is strong and 1 is sweet, 2 is sour and 1 is sweet. Add a little bit of spice and everything will come out nice. And that developed my formula of 2-1-2-1 plus. So 2 parts base spirit, 1 part modifier, 2 parts of your juice or mixer, and 1 part flavoring agent. And then if you want, add a little spice note to it. And if you look at the margarita as an example, 2 parts tequila, 1 part triple sec, 2 parts lemon sour, 1 part lime juice. And then if you want to add some spice, then you could add spice, herb, fruit, whatever, a new accent. And if you follow the formula, it'll always come out balanced. So for batching is parts, and that part is a bottle. So you pour 2 bottles of base spirit, 1 bottle of modifier, you're good to go.
The batching the legal department can get behind. It's parts. Yeah. I mean, I do get that they don't want you to have on record some recipe that says, even a classic Manhattan is a decent amount of booze in one drink. Yeah. It's like, don't want someone to be like, well, the, master mixologist from Beam Suntory is encouraging overconsumption. I get that, even though I don't think any reasonable person would think that. Like, that's what they're trying to avoid. Yeah.
And today I get in arguments all the time with bartenders all over, and even my close personal friends that we teach class with. Today you look at the average pour behind the bar is 2 ounces. And I'm like, wait a minute, when did this happen? You guys are encouraging overconsumption. No, we're just making a drink. Drink prices are this high, you gotta justify the drink price and put in more booze. I said, no, that shouldn't be the way it is, And I think drink prices are they're crazy. They're literally crazy right now.
Yeah.
But, I think the key, and one thing that I teach, I speak more to consumers, and, the higher level, the bartender should know, but they always are interested. I think they want to listen to you to see if they can nitpick at you, or if they could take something that they can use, and I'm happy to do all that. But I always tell people, listen, a good cocktail is not a strong cocktail, but a well-balanced cocktail. And we should always seek the balance, not the strength. Some cocktails are spirit forward, and, you bring up the Manhattan, and I fight with people over the Manhattan. My formula is the 3-1-2. So 3 parts whiskey, 1 part vermouth, 2 dashes of bitters. And if I look at that at a standard bar, it's 1.5 ounces of whiskey, 1/2 ounce of vermouth, and 2 dashes of bitters. But many people in the industry, and a lot of my close friends, I go, no, it's 2-1-2, 2-1-2. What's the area code of Manhattan? It's 2-1-2. I said, okay, what was the area code in Manhattan when the Manhattan was created in 1874? There wasn't one. There wasn't even a phone back then, so don't give me that area code stuff, So a friend of mine who works for Beam out in Washington, who loves Manhattans, and it just sent me a picture the other day. This poor guy cannot get a good Manhattan wherever he goes. And he's always sending me pictures of it. But I always teach the 3-1-2, and he goes, oh, that's the Chicago Manhattan, because it's the area code of Chicago, 3-1-2. However you want to look at it. But, I believe the Manhattan is a whiskey cocktail. So if you want it to be a whiskey cocktail, it should be whiskey forward.
Celebrate the whiskey.
Yeah. And a lot of people, using, different vermouths, if you... a 2-to-1, the vermouth starts to take over the whiskey, and I'm the same with my Boulevardier. I've researched the Boulevardier a lot, and you do find recipes that are 2-1 in the formula of the whiskey, 2 parts whiskey, 1 part vermouth, 1 part Campari. But so many people have ingrained in their mind that the Boulevardier is nothing more than a Negroni with bourbon.
So 1-to-1-to-1, yeah.
1-to-1-to-1, and I'm like, no, it should be about the whiskey. And that also tells you should get the cocktail the way you like it.
Sure, yeah. I mean, that's the best way to learn. Experiment with both. Try them both. Sure. Yeah, back to back, and see which one actually works for you, right. Or your guest if they're interested. I did want to make sure there are 2 things that I wanted to make sure we did talk about before, because I want to be respectful of your time. How did you come about holding a Guinness World Record? This is crazy, so please let me know.
I got a call, and every once in a while I remember her name, but she was head of marketing at Beam, and called me and said, hey, we're thinking about doing this at the nightclub and bar show. Do you know anybody who could do this? And I'm like, well, I could do this. She's like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, I could do this, And she's like, okay. And 10 minutes later, I get a call from John Meisler. So she said, God, I can't remember her name. She went on to work for Jägermeister. Anyways, but she said you could do this. I go, yeah, John, I could do this. And he goes, well, you're going to have to come here and prove it. I said, okay, I'm going to have to set this up. And so I set it up, and, in Las Vegas, you got the little 8-ounce highball glasses that they serve at the slot machines, and you're getting free drinks, right? They fit 24 on a tray. So I designed a system where I had all of my base spirits on my left hand and all the Kuiper flavors on my right. And so the rules were set forth by Guinness. Every cocktail had to have a minimum of 3 ingredients. Every cocktail had to be completed before you started the next one. And every cocktail had to be different. No one could physically hand you anything. The only thing people could do was set glasses on your bar and put ice in your well. I had to ice all of my own glasses, and then I had to make the drinks and have them taken away. what I did is I put 24 glasses on a tray, got a giant ice scoop, 2 scoops, fill them all up with ice. With my left hand, I'd grab 1 bottle. My right hand, I'd grab 2, and then I'd pour. And every time I set my hand down, I'd grab another bottle with my left hand, and then pour, and pour, and pour. When I got through 12, I'd set 1 bottle down in my right and pick up another one, and I'd have, now, so technically, they're all different. And I went through this, and so they made me go to Deerfield, which is where corporate office was. And I'm up there just laughing and joking and having a good time and working out of bus pans, not out of a well or anything. And it was kind of hairy. And they come up, and I remember Brian Stockard, who was in charge of De Kuiper and Canadian Club at the time. He comes up, and John goes, "Where's he at?" And he said 200 and something or 300 something. He goes, "Oh my God, when did he?" He goes, "He broke the record in 18 minutes. And they're like, I'm like, "That's right, Johnny boy, you didn't think I could do it, did you?" And I'm laughing and joking, and we got done, and they said, "Now wait a minute." And I did a little over 700 cocktails that first hour.
Yeah, so most cocktails served in 1 hour.
Yeah.
Still held by you, right?
No, that's been changed.
No, yeah. Really? I didn't see that. What
happened was, after I did that, the group said, "Hey, wait a minute, Bobby, we know you're a great bartender, but something's wrong. The record is 179. You just tripled it." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Listen, one thing I learned from the flair bartenders about competitions, you read the rules and you do not cross that line. That everything I've done is within the rules of what Guinness put forward." And they said, "Well, we don't want to make a joke of this. We want it to be serious." I said, "Well, what are you thinking?" And they go, "Let's take a look at what he did." And it was the guy from London. And so he's shaking and straining and doing all this stuff. And I said, "Well, what I did was within the rules." "No, we're not doubting that, but we wanted to make it look a little more professional, So we went and got recipes that had appeared somewhere on a menu in the United States from the Beam database. And then I put them in order. Eddie Perales, Gaston Martinez, and Anthony Alba were my support team. They helped me put everything together, and they made me go. We went to the Rio, and they said, "All right, we're going to train you." And so I'm over there practicing. I said, "I got this. Don't worry." I'm just like, I don't rehearse. I just go and I do. And they go, no, you're going to practice. And they made me practice a few times. And when we went in and did it, the old record was 179, and I set at the time a new record of 253 different cocktails that were shaken, strained, or shaken and poured and built. And they were all really good. Rob Husted was interviewing me on camera after, and we had all of the drinks spread out on tables there. We were on the stage at Nightclub and Bar Show. And so Rob's sitting there interviewing me on a camera, and this guy comes up with a handful of straws and is straw tasting through all of the drinks. And he goes, "Hey." So I go, "What?" I go, "I'm doing an interview here." And he goes, "These are good." And then Rob instantly zoomed right in on the guy, and I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "No, these cocktails are good. I thought this was all bullshit, but these are all good." I said, "Well, they're, if you make good cocktails with good ingredients, you're going to make a good cocktail, use good ingredients, you're going to make a good cocktail." And that's what I did. He goes, "This is amazing. I thought this was all bullshit." And I turned to Rob and go, "You got that on camera, didn't you?" He goes, "Yeah, I did. I don't know whatever happened to that footage, but it's out there somewhere."
That's
Rob's
awesome. Yeah. I mean, if you're listening and you don't have much bartending experience, making that many drinks in an hour, just repeat drinks in a well, is difficult.
Yeah,
to do all different is a lot. Yeah.
I had to make one and have it taken away, make it, take it away, make it, take it away.
Yeah, that's crazy. Can you tell me about Mixology Made Easy? How that came about, what you're doing there?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because it was kind of my philosophy when I was with Beam. My role at Beam is as the Master Mixologist and Senior Portfolio Ambassador. I represented all of the brands. And while our ambassadors were very good at creating events and highlighting specific brands, I represented them all. So I had to incorporate everything. And quite often when you go to talk to a group, especially a bartending group, Master Mixologist, we don't have time for all that. I don't have time to do this and do that. And, molecular has made its way into the, bartending. People are like, "I can't do that. I don't have all that."
Spherifying, pureed apricots or whatever you're doing.
I'm here to show you that it's easy. Mixology can be easy. And then, hey, I needed a tagline, and that's what it came up with. So what I'm doing today is, I'll do that bartending training and things like that. But my favorite thing to do is take people on a journey through tasting. And I've been fortunate. I've been able to do a couple of vintage bourbon tastings and featured some just absolutely amazing whiskeys from the 60s, 70s, 80s, stuff that's not made anymore. I've got a great guy out here in Las Vegas that I get product from, and if if any of your listeners want to get in touch with him, I'll let them get in touch with you to give them my information.
Yes, please do.
And I'll make sure that he's okay with that, because he's a private dealer, and it's just absolutely amazing what he has. Blow your mind what he has in his storage. But I get to do those kinds of tastings. I've got a tequila tasting coming up, so
that's awesome.
Some of these corporate events, they want when they come for a convention, they feel like they've got to fill everybody's time, and they want to do something fun. And what's more fun than having a cocktail? So I've been fortunate. I went to Capitol Hill in last year and went up on the hill, or in early 25. And I said, well, where am I going? And, oh, you're going up to Capitol Hill. So I'm telling all my friends, I'm finally making drinks at the White House. And then I got there and I go, oh, it's not the White House. I'm on Capitol Hill. Yeah. But I'm close. I'm getting closer. And so we went in, and they had the Democrat and the Republican congressman from Kentucky created this group that they called the Bourbon Caucus. And they asked me to come in and talk about
Why
bourbon.
wouldn't they ask you? Yeah, that's perfect.
Sure, And so I went in to demonstrate how to make an old-fashioned. And so I get there, and I said, well, how many people are we expecting? And they said, we might get about 25 or so. I said, okay, great. I'm going to do my whole classroom setup. And so I get there, they go, yeah, the classroom is probably not going to work out. So I set up like a table where I deconstructed all the ingredients, and then people would come up and I would give them the ingredient. Okay, we're going to add this, do this, do that, and taste it. They go, oh, this is delicious. And I took them through the journey and how to do it. And they loved it. But my biggest setback, which turned out to be really fun for them, was I kept demanding that I have the big clear ice cubes, which is the oddest thing in mixology. Ice is the newest big thing in mixology.
Yeah.
Ice has been around forever. What do you mean ice is the new big thing? But clear ice is really, it's very important for an old fashioned. So I kept harping on the people in DC. I said, I've got people here. I can have ice delivered. We got it. We got you taken care of. Well, I get there. I've got the big, beautiful ice cubes. They were gorgeous. No glassware. I'm going to make a drink without glassware. And they go, well, we got these plastic cups. I'm going, are you kidding me? And these are U.S. congressmen. And they go, well, that's all we could get. And so the ice cube doesn't fit to the bottom. And so I'm like, no. And then it turns out there's over 100 people there. And I had 80 congressmen from both sides of the aisle there. And they're coming up, and I said, so I'm taking them through the process of making, this old fashioned. So I'm thinking, well, I've got to use this to my advantage. And I said, I want you to pour everything in a glass and don't stir it and taste it. And they're like, oh, okay. I said, now what I need you to do is spin that ice cube around so it melts and gets down in so the liquid comes up. So we're adding the dilution that you need in the cocktail. And I said, now taste it again. And like, oh man, that is so much.
That did open it up. Oh yeah.
I use it as a bonus. That was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that,
Yeah,
and
I didn't know. I was like, what are you going to do? Tell people to put it in their pocket? Like, where do you go from that? Oh man, that's awesome.
It's crazy how some of and what we look at now is the details behind a cocktail. I mean, how often in the old days, and you used to ask for a lemon twist or an orange twist, the bartender would take the lemon or lime or orange and stick his thumbnail in there and pull the peel off and hand it to you. That was a twist, and then it evolved to where we, started cutting them off. You do the spiral, or you just cut both ends of the lemon off, score it all the way around, and just peel it off. And now, the vegetable peeler has become standard equipment behind the bar. And then it was just cutting it. And now it's like cutting it and trimming it, or making a shape out of it, or whatever.
Well, lighting it on fire if you're Dale,
sure,
Yeah, awesome.
And it makes an amazing difference. I tell people, going back to Manhattan, standard garnish Manhattan is usually a cherry, and I'll do that, and I'll say, well, watch this, and I'll cut, a really small coin of lemon peel and just snap it in there, and they'll go, well, what are you going to do? I said, taste it, and they're like, their eyes just light. I'm like, how did you do that? It's magic. It's just a lemon peel, but it adds so much, and it's those little details of, making it right, and the difference between stirring and shaking, and proper glassware is a big thing, all of that.
And
it's not hard. It's easy.
No, yeah. I'm thinking too, everything old is new again. You know, the ice, the standard used to be that clear ice from the lake, and now going right back to it, they used to have those garnishes, and it was all codified and coming back just like it used to be.
I don't know if you ever worked with them, but Sunkiss used to make that machine where you just put the lemon or lime in there and crank the handle. It would slice them up, 8 slices, you know.
I was thinking of the one where you squeeze the juice out, so I haven't done the one that makes the perfect garnish yet.
Yeah, no, well, you would put it in there and it would cut 8 wedges. Bam, bam, bam.
Yeah.
You know,
do they look pretty?
Sometimes if you get them seated right. You know, other times they're crooked, you know.
Yeah.
But the big key to that was rarely was that fruit washed before you cut it. You know, I'm a big fan. You know, any citrus that I use, I wash it before I cut it. You know, you always see a bowl of citrus on my stage or bar, wherever. It's always been washed before. And you can tell when you walk into a bar and you see that sticker on the lemon or the lime or the orange, it hasn't been washed.
Yeah. Better to see that there than on your garnish, for sure.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, wow. There's a little extra here. Before we leave, I did have one other question. I hope it's okay. I thought it'd be fun to explore the opposite side, because I always like the inversion aspect. If someone's listening today and they are hoping to someday become like you or be as good at mixology, what would you do and what would you not do? How would you turn someone into a master mixologist? How would you guarantee that they fail too?
Wow. I think, you know, to be successful, you got to be a good listener. You got to listen. You got to learn. Being book smart isn't going to do it for you. You know, you can, you know all these recipes wherever you're at. You know, when we talk to bartenders in accounts, you know, when you have to go to an account, they've got 20, 30 bartenders. Tell them, listen, if you have a drink menu, you need to know all of those drinks on that menu, and you all need to make them exactly the same, because your consistency is key to the success of your bar. And whatever your program is, consistency is that key. But you also have to be creative on your own, because once you get someone to buy into a cocktail, then you can say, hey, the person said, I really like this. What else can you make that is similar to this but has this? Or, yeah, you made me a gin cocktail. I do like that, but, I'm a whiskey guy. Can you make me something with bourbon? Sure, And having that creativity and being able to listen to what the guest wants. Because remember, as a bartender, your role is not to make drinks you like. It's to make drinks that your guests like. And you want to make sure that your guests are happy. And I tell people, a guest always comes in with a level of expectation. And if you can exceed that level of expectation, you'll be successful. And as a bartender, we want to do what I call the 3 R's. You want them to order a drink so much that they reorder. That's your first R. They've reordered a drink with you. So now the next time that they go out, you want them to return. You want them to come back. That's your second R, right? And now the third R is you want them to recommend to their friends. Man, I had a great time with Andrew, man. We got to go see him. You got to come see him. This guy makes great cocktails. So now you've got a guest that have reordered a drink. They've returned the next time they come out. And now they're recommending to their friends, and that's going to make you successful. And that's what we want to do behind the bar. Because remember, and I say this to young bartenders all the time, listen, you're in this business because you like to make people happy. And if you haven't realized that, you either need to open your eyes to that, or you need to go do something else. The old additive of the old days were, hey, great, you're bartending, but what do you want to do? Bartending is a great career. It truly is, and it's fun. The stories that you get from it are great. A lot of times what we as bartenders, I remember making this quote to media one time. They said, what are the great stories behind the bar? And I said, the great stories behind the bars are the ones that we can't tell you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, that doctor-patient confidentiality that goes on behind a bar too. It is such a rewarding. It's done so much for me. I mean, here I am, a guy that barely made it out of high school, really. Never went to college, worked my way through the ranks and worked at it and wanted to be good at it. And that's the key. Just trying to do it just to make money is not good enough. You have to want to be good at it. And you got to study. I mean, you see all the books that are behind me.
I know. A lot for those listening.
They're all stacked up. I'm running out of room, but I collect I don't have as many as some people. Like Livio's got a great collection, of antique books and things. But everywhere I go, go walk in a used bookstore. I look for what kind of cocktail guide, what kind of bartending book do you have? What do you have on bourbon, on vodka and gin and rum and all that? And I like to read the history of it and learn about it and then share those stories, as I'm teaching. So, for the young person that wants to get into it, it is a great career. You're going to have long nights. You're going to have, your back's going to ache, your knees are going to ache, your shoulders are going to ache. And, but today people are preparing for it a lot better than what they did in my days,
For sure, yeah. The shoes are a lot better.
And it's extremely rewarding. It really is, to be able to see people that make them happy. And that's what you're doing, trying to make people happy.
I like what you said there at the beginning too. Like, it doesn't so much matter what you know, it's how people feel and how you relate to them. Because people are ordering drinks from a human, not a book. Right. But it's interesting you have to balance that, because you do need to learn. Being a bartender and then moving to Som, I've never been unhappy about learning something. Anytime you learn something, you just got another little story, another little something, a little angle that you can make a new drink or impress someone, or just like, did you know? It does add up. As an aside, if you're ever in Omaha, Jackson Street Booksellers. It's one of the best used bookstores I've ever encountered. Do you know Doug Frost, the
Yes.
MSMW? He actually is the one that told me about it, and it blows my mind. So, yeah. If you're here too, I'll buy you a steak. So if you ever fly through, you never know. For the listener at home, someone who wants to learn more about you, maybe see what Mixology Made Easy is like, where could someone go to find out about you?
Well, I do have a website that I developed a year ago. I don't put a lot of time because I'm not that tech savvy, but I do have a website, mixologymadeeasy.com. It does have a little bit of what I do on there, a couple little videos that are kind of fun, all from my Beam background on there. Yeah. And, if you're ever in Las Vegas, look me up. I love going out and showing people around and taking them to places they would not go to, get them out of the casino and get them out into the world and see some other stuff that's available out here.
As the kids these days say, touch grass. Although in Las Vegas it's artificial grass, but it's still getting out in the real world. It's okay. Anyone who's listening, maybe in the car, didn't have the ability to write down any of that stuff, I will have all that as links in the show notes, and Great. I won't have his friend who has access to vintage spirits, but like Bobby G said, get in touch with me and then we'll see if we can get you that info.
Yeah. My email's pretty simple, BobbyG@Mixology Made Easy. So
shout him out, say hi.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, Bobby G, thank you for coming on today. It was a real pleasure getting to talk to you.
I'm so glad you reached out, man. It's been a long time. You sparked some great memories in me today.
I had some horrified memories on my end. All the crushed ice I had to make from you. So.
I don't remember that.
I do.
Really?
Yeah.
And we were in that little nightclub there in Santa Fe.
Milagro, yeah.
That was a lot of fun. I think I was doing my mint juleps, maybe.
I think so.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. That is today's episode. Now, if you have not taken a moment to check out our website, please do. It's servesyouRightPod.com. We have past episodes and all sorts of other things there. If you want to get in touch with me, that's the place to do it. I do appreciate that you've given me your most valuable asset, your time and attention. So thank you for listening. And stay tuned. We have some really cool guests coming up. I would hate it if you missed it. Cheers.